Hello, welcome to another episode of CloseShave TV. Today we have the first series of hopefully many series where we have like a talk show, a discussion, and we have a panel of guests where we're going to discuss a certain topic, a debate. And the main debate and the title today is with the UK so-called Muslim grooming gangs, fact, fiction, or fallacy. Over the last few years, I'd say that we've seen many cases of, especially South Asian men, people from the Muslim community that have been arrested for criminal activity, for child sexual exploitation. What we need to discuss, I think, and it's important, is this a problem really in the Muslim community, particularly the British Pakistani community, or is it something that maybe the media, again, is a bit hysteric about? And it needs a bit of clarification. What I want to quickly read to you all is a saying from the former Labour MP of Rotherham, Sarah Champion. She resigned from her position as Shadow Women and Equalities Minister after she said the following statement. She said, Britain has a problem, Britain has a problem with British Pakistani men raping and exploiting white girls. Now, after that, she stood down because there were quite controversial comments, which she apologised. What I want to discuss today, is there a problem in the Muslim community with grooming gangs and child sexual exploitation? The first person I want to ask to speak about this issue is Omar Khan. What would you like to say about, is it fact, fiction, is there an element of truth to it?
Well, obviously, I mean,
Is the Muslim community in denial as well, right?
the first stage to resolve any problem would be to recognise it, and clearly, evidently, it's something that is there. Whether it's there solely as it's been represented, I don't think that's quite the case. It is a problem, it does happen, and that's quite clear. However, the way it's shown, the way it's represented, the way the media deals with it is wrong, the way our community deals with it is also wrong. Denial would not doesn't do anything to aid the problem, and nor does scandalizing a whole demographic, a whole community, and just sort of putting the blame, because obviously you get minority groups doing all sorts of atrocities within any community, and if you just highlight that, it gives a wrong representation and it causes undue bitterness. And we live in a multicultural society where we've got so much strains as it is, and this is something that just adds to the animosity, and it doesn't do anyone any justice, I believe. So I think the way that it's dealt with by the community itself and by the media, both approaches are very wrong, and it's not doing anything to resolve the issue.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we hear, for example, is a lot of statistics and percentages being thrown around. And the research that I've done, very brief research, that there's two forms of child sexual exploitation. There are two groups. Type 1, or Group 1, is those that target vulnerable young teenage girls, not because they're paedophiles per se, because it's a vulnerability that they're taking advantage of. So they're taking advantage of vulnerabilities. Then there's type 2 that the research has put forward, which is those that are genuinely interested in younger kids, boys, girls, etc., infants, for example, that you'd actually call paedophiles. Now, from the research that was done back, I believe, in 2012, is child exploitation and online protection. They mentioned that 75% of those cases that were studied, and bear in mind there were 57 cases, yeah? So a lot of the discussion has come from the 57 cases. 75% were Asian, okay, South Asian background. Type 2, which is going for online grooming, going for young kids, normally by individuals, 100% came back as being white. So we need to put things in perspective when we're discussing, obviously, statistics and figures, right? Because back in 2015, 2016, there was 56,000 reported child sexual abuse cases reported to the police, 56,000. So a lot of the research has come from this 57 cases reported to the police, and the percentages have come from the 57, some say 58 cases. What do you think about that? Is it a manipulation of facts, figures? What do you think about that, guys?
If I can just say something.
Please,
one thing that's important is who's talking about this. And for example, look around us. We're all guys. We're all men. There's not a single person here who's actually the demographic of a victim that we're talking about. So we just need to be aware of that as well. In terms of stats, 57 cases, yes, but these are 57 cases involving more than one person.
Mhm.
They involve hundreds and even sometimes thousands of young girls. So
Mhm.
actually, the stats can be used by everyone, right? Like
Mhm.
it's that way. So if you multiply by that, by the number of victims, we're talking of a lot of young girls. 75% is also, yeah, sure. There's 100% of, let's say, if type 2 cases, which are basically pedophiles, are white men, you wouldn't then go to a Somali community and go, we need to deal with this in the Somali community, because we know that that's not the case.
Mhm.
You'd go to white communities. In the same way, when you got 75% of people coming in from Pakistani backgrounds, you would go, actually, we need to deal with this in these communities. It makes logic. It's just logical to me, right? Now, one thing that's interesting to me also is this thing about kind of, targeting minorities with this, because what's the size of the Pakistani population in the UK? Is it 75%? It's not.
No,
It's
of course
actually,
1.7 million, I think.
you know,
Pakistani
it's
people.
5% or less, right?
So 7% of the population are Asians,
yeah.
Mm.
and
And then-
Asians are big figure, right?
So if you
Very
take that,
broad
yeah,
term.
let's go Pakistani. I think it's 4 or 5%. That's men and women. Half that. That's 2%.
Precisely, and there
Right?
is
So
children amongst
2% of people of this large, reasonably small community, 75% are coming from that tiny community. It is a problem,
them.
right? Just like, it really helps me as an Asian person, as a brown man, to think about things with what would I do and think if it came from another community.
Mhm.
If our young people were targeted by white men, right, and it was like 75%, I would be like, we need to investigate that. I don't care about race. I don't care. I mean,
There'll be an uproar in a
there'll be an
community,
uproar.
and we'll
So
be
why
hearing.
is it that here identity politics is so great that we are, sitting, and unfortunately, it says a lot about the victims that we are, whether it's because we could find them or
Mhm.
couldn't, they're all guys here, right? It's
Mm.
hard to talk about this as a woman, I think.
Yes.
And we need to involve more.
Just to clarify that, women were invited.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was an open
Yeah, I
invitation, but
believe
unfortunately they didn't
No,
turn
no,
up.
I
And in
believe-
fact,
yeah,
what you
yeah,
said, I would have loved
Yeah,
to have a
yeah,
female
yeah,
perspective
yeah,
on
yeah.
this, because I think it's
I'm
important.
not blaming
No, because
you, yeah,
you're right,
yeah.
because this is really male dominated
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah.
and we need the opposite sex. We need females to speak
Well,
about this as
they're
well.
the victims.
Precisely.
May I interject at this point? First of all, I think your points are spot on. We are too engulfed in the media and what the media is saying at that particular point. Let's step back. There is no doubt in my mind that currently the discussions that take place in relation to grooming, in relation to exploitation and so forth, it has two main titles. One is Pakistani origin and the second being Muslim.
Hmm.
We need to deal with those two first
Mhm.
before we step further. And before I go into that, and I know it's a discussion, open discussion, I don't want to take too much time. This is not a race or a colour issue. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, in any community, not acceptable.
Mhm.
The problem you've got is education. We need to, first of all, educate ourselves, victims, potential victims, but more importantly, anybody who's within that domain. It is unfortunate. I've had some involvement within my criminal legal background, my profession, where you will see a pattern, and you're quite right. The first one is vulnerability. Some victims are so vulnerable, and they are targeted. We must deal with that. And why are they targeted? You will see socially they have lack of resources, education, funding, not a conventional family background. And I'm not saying this is application to all, but
Mhm.
we've got to deal with those problems. We've got to educate and say, well, they're not vulnerable. You are not, and you shouldn't be targeted.
Hmm.
There are agencies and people who you need to approach if this is happening.
So that's a pattern you've seen in your.
It's
legal-
consistently,
yeah.
consistently,
Legal work.
consistently.
Hmm.
But then, should I sit here and, being of Pakistani origin, deny that it's not a problem? It is a problem, and I'm sorry. It is a problem. And Umar's point, and brother's point, and Jaz's point is accurate. We have to acknowledge and accept.
Mhm.
We are denying it. We are denying
And
it.
how does it make you feel, if you don't mind me
Yeah, of
just
course.
interjecting, Mohammed, when you hear people going, because it's an identity thing as well. It's like, oh, we don't like
Of
it.
course.
Every time I see in the news another Pakistani name, I'm like, you know.
Me, it makes
Mm.
no bit of difference, and
Yeah,
I'll tell you. And
yeah.
I'll tell you the reality why. Yes, you would assume you would feel offended by it, but if you're educated enough to know that this is just a device or a tactic to make you feel imbalanced, it wouldn't bother you. Of course, it
Mhm.
doesn't bother you. But nevertheless, saying that point is there is a problem,
Yes.
and we must first of all, not take away in denial. We have to accept there is.
Okay, Shahid, do you think we're in denial as a community?
I mean, I agree with the points that have been made, but I think also what we have to understand, when we're talking about a discussion about this subject, the problem is that this subject has become very tainted. Now, I'm sure we're going to have people that are going to criticize us that why are you even talking about this? You're actually, sort of feeding into that narrative that, exactly what the media, and especially what the far right are always talking about Muslim grooming gangs. And in the Muslim community, the problem that we have, or in the Asian community, is that these are very taboo subjects that people don't like to talk about, and it's brushed under the carpet. The problem that we have, that when we try to address this issue in an intelligent and intellectual way, we can't but fall into somebody's trap. Because the far right could pick up on this conversation and say, look, even the Asians are admitting that there's a problem, so we're bang on in what we're saying, and that's why the whites have to stand up and unite and so on and so forth. Even they say there's a problem. And then the Asians will grab us and say, well, you see, you've now emboldened these people by discussing it in the first place. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
I'd like to comment on that. When I actually even put this kind of debate advert out, I had people from our community on Facebook, from our community, Pakistani community, Muslim community, saying this is racist. The whole idea of that we as Pakistanis, and you're just feeding into the whole narrative, as you said. And even I was kind of attacked for why are you even doing a debate like this? But my point is, if we don't discuss it and we don't actually openly and willingly discuss this issue and acknowledge that there is an issue, where are we going to go? What are we going to achieve? And you're right, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And Sky News also, they reported, because Quillian did their research, many people have attacked actually, because they said they played with figures and manipulation, etc., etc. But what they mention is British Pakistani researchers have said that 84% or 87%, I believe, of the child grooming gangs are Muslims or South Asian Pakistani Muslims. So it even gives that credence. Oh look, even the British Pakistanis are agreeing to it, and they're so it has to be true, right? But the point is, can we challenge this narrative? What do you think, Adil?
Well, me personally, I think you're right. There is a problem. We all know. Like you said, to fix anything, you have to acknowledge there's a problem first. That's fine. Okay, we know there's a problem. Everybody knows there's a problem, but that could be in any context, right? So we know if somebody looks at a child a particular way, you can tell, I don't like the way that guy looks at that kid. You can get that feel for it. So you'll pull your child away, or you'll pull your niece or nephew away. So, I don't quite talk to them. Just the way that somebody looks at a child, you can get a feel as an adult, I don't feel comfortable around this person. And like you said, if people are vulnerable, they've been let down by our system, firstly. Why are they in that position in the first place? People like that will plan. And the other thing is, all of this stuff happens at night, or does it happen in the daytime? Are these 9-to-5 jobs that are people that are preying on these kids? Yeah. So if a child walks into a shop and they look hungry and they haven't got enough money to buy some food, and there's a guy working in that shop, he doesn't own the shop, he just works there, and he offers them free food or whatever, and says, let me get you a drink, or here, take a couple of quid, get a beer can from the off license that's still open at 11 o'clock at night. It's that environment. There's a lot more to this dynamic than just being Pakistani. And it's not a Muslim problem, because nowhere in Islam is this justified. You can't even intend harm towards
But when you say it's not a Muslim problem, I think what you might or need
Islam
to say it's not an Islamic problem, but then it's a Muslim problem because the Muslims are doing it, right?
They can be labelled as Muslim, but if you actually speak to these people that have been convicted and charged and see how much they actually know about Islam, the answer is little to none.
Yeah, but I don't think that matters. I personally think that doesn't matter, because the fact is they come from the Muslim community. I mean, and they're going to claim that they are Muslims.
Yeah.
Whether how Islamic or religious they are practicing, I think that's irrelevant. The issue is look, I mean, you mentioned I'll mention something very interesting that happened to me about 2 years ago. I was standing outside the Dixies at 10 o'clock at night. I was waiting for my order, and right in front of the Dixies is like a bargain booth.
Yeah.
And there's a group of girls and lads there, and one of the girls came up to me. She looks about 15, trying to pass for 18. Right? She said, could you do us a favour, please? I said, what do you want to do? She goes, please, could you just go buy some booze? Yeah? I said, no, I don't want to, no. Yeah. And she kept insisting. Yeah. And I just said, look, I don't want to do it. Leave me alone. And I went into then I had an aha moment. I thought, right, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Now, if I was someone else...
Yeah, if your mindset was different...
okay, what can I get out of this?
Yeah.
Right? But how am I going to take advantage of this situation? Yeah. And these are some of the things that are happening. But then the question is, why are these girls and boys, these young kids, out so late, unsupervised? Okay, we're not in the 60s. This is we're the millennial, a generation. Why are they outside by
Children should feel
themselves?
safe at all times.
Right.
As I would want my parents to feel safe. I live in a predominantly Asian area, and I know if my parents decide to take a walk at 11 o'clock at night, I know they'll be safe. Even though the area I live in has got people say it's very dangerous and.
But actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
But to be honest with you, if my mother's walking up and she's got heavy groceries, somebody will come to help her and say, "Auntie, let me drop these off to your house."
And I want to also like draw a comparison there, because actually, you speak to Asian girls, all of them will tell you something happened to them. All
Yeah,
of
they
them.
will.
Right, so
But
it's
Interesting.
It's just that there's a difference, because we talk about vulnerability,
Yeah.
right? But actually, you talk to any of your cousins, your sisters, your aunts and uncles. Your aunts. They will all talk about something. So
Yeah,
I don't
something's
know how
happened at
much.
It's funny you said uncles there, because what the
Yeah.
reports and the research we've done so far, specifically with the girls, it's type 1. We spoke of type 1,
Yeah.
right? It's about targeting females.
Yeah.
So currently there's no statistics about also boys
Yeah.
that are so the most correct me if I'm wrong, Mohammed, right? The majority of the reports about sexual abuse and exploitation in this country is those that have been targeted by family members, friends, people that they know.
I'm glad that's
Boys
raised.
or girls, right?
Well, I'm glad that's raised. Can we be very careful about statistics?
Okay.
I say that simply because there are cases which aren't reported.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course.
There are, without a shadow of a doubt, cases where it involves non-Pakistani, non-Muslim, and non-female victim, and they're not reported. In my experience, may I say my experience, and I think that would be a fair point. Most recently, there was neither. It was male victim, and may I say a different colour and different background. When you have either type 1 or type 2, it makes no real difference. They are both very serious criminal offences. They're very serious. And you have agencies which will look at the psychology behind the criminal offence and, of course, the background and so forth. Without a shadow of a doubt, it is not, and I'll say this, a cultural thing only. It may have an influence. We can't deny that. Of course, and I use Brother Imtiaz's point, if you speak to one of your cousins or one of the females or something, someone's got a story somewhere. But then that could be in any culture, in any environment. The stories may still be the same, but the backgrounds are different, aren't they? But what I'm trying to say is, what I'm most desperately trying to say in this instance here is, there are victims on both sides, in regards to female and male.
Okay.
And you do hear frequently, and I do come across frequently, and I have in the past, it could be a young boy, very commonly, during the course of a period of time. It could be a young girl as well. And mentioning your point very quickly, may I say, and I'm glad you raised that, the issue of young girls outside bargain booths encouraging another elderly male to purchase some alcohol. Now, let's not be shy and admit that happens frequently.
Yes.
Let's not be shy and admit that the shop owners are happy to sell because they need to make the extra pound.
Yes.
But who is there to govern that? And I see frequently parents struggling to discipline.
Can I just bring in Omar Rashid, what do you think, and even Waleed, because what we also heard was that targeting white girls. So supposedly there's an issue that there's a very racist underpinning of why this is happening, that the way British Pakistanis, which what been said, they see white girls as an easy target, easy meat. Do you think there's some truth to that, culturally, and how we perceive them?
I don't think so, in my opinion. I think as much white girls are being targeted, equally as much Asian would be. It's just a matter of shame and the culture community, what's not reported. The amount of things that go unreported is unbelievable within our communities, and we're all aware because of shame and how we deal with things. Unfortunately, it's not the best of manner. Something will happen to a girl, she wouldn't be confident to tell her parents. They'd deal with it in a manner whereby, why were you there? Why were you doing this? Why were you doing
Right,
this? Unfortunately, we're not supportive in that, and what that leads to is the fact that there's a lot of cases of all sorts of things that happen that don't get reported. And as the brother mentioned, if you did ever sit down, many years later, they probably when they become your auntie, they might discuss with you that, oh well, we were young and this guy would do this. They wouldn't do it at the time. They haven't got the support.
But do you
at
think
the time.
that mentally scars that person to put a level
Absolutely.
of acceptance on that, to
Absolutely.
say, well, it was done to me, and if it happens to my daughter, I'll just tell her, look, I went through it, you'll be okay as well. but it doesn't make it
It's
right.
just, see, people want to bury their head under the sand. Nobody
Yeah.
wants that to happen to their daughter.
Of course.
They don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
Not that they don't want to know about it, they just don't want it to be there.
They don't have to deal
And
with
it is there, and these
Yeah.
problems are there. It's just a matter of, addressing them in a manner which is more comfortable.
I agree with you. Even if you put in the same situation, if you took an Asian Pakistani girl,
Yes.
Muslim Pakistani girl, and put her outside a bargain booth and said to
She'll be victimized.
exactly the same
Absolutely.
situation,
Yes.
Yeah.
the people that are going to prey on her because to them it's a piece of meat. They don't. Do you think they care about her family? Do you think they care about her emotions, her background? They don't.
So
care.
this
To
is
them, it's a
this
piece
is
of
another
meat.
myth I've heard, that because it's not just been vulnerable white girls, it could be girls from all backgrounds,
Yeah,
right?
It would be. but
And
it's not
again,
been
we're talking about
reported.
girls, and you mentioned there's boys also
Yeah.
involved in this.
But
Go on, Shahid.
I mean, I'm probably the oldest here in the panel, so I mean, I remember growing up as a kid, and what we used to say and how it used to be on the streets. I mean, I don't want to expose my sins, but is that we never used to chat up Asian girls, yeah, but we had no problem chatting up white girls. Yeah, as because it was a kind of a like she's uppity and
She's
that's
one-
Might be a
she-
relative.
she-
that's
we
that's
find
yeah
out.
that's a bit that's a
She's
bit
one
too,
of us,
that's a bit
and
too
you don't want the
close.
father to find out.
But with the white girl, it's no problem. You
Right.
can chat them up, you can go clubbing with them or whatever.
So there was that culture.
There was. This is why I'm saying to you that I mean,
But
if
that's right,
we're
that
gonna,
still exists in the
Yeah.
younger
Yeah.
generation
it,
today.
it
Let
does.
him
Yeah,
finish his point,
but
please.
if that was me, and growing up in the 70s, yeah, that was the kind of culture that we had then. So it did exist, yeah. But the third thing I wanted to say was that, picking up on your point about religion, about being religious, and it's not necessarily that these people are religious and they have no understanding of religion.
Just
And I'm,
fear
and,
of God.
and I'm going to throw this out there, and I might get some stick for this year. But then, what about the situations in our masajids
Exactly.
where we have
Yes.
religious teachers and religious imams, and the kind of things that they get up to? And I'm sure everybody's got a story. Now,
Yes.
these things are even more, but just as dangerous, and it's happening. These people are people who are teaching our children, who claim to be religiously knowledgeable, yet they behave in such an atrocious way.
I mean, see, the nature of the
sorry.
beast. The nature of the beast is it brings up so many other topics. And
Yeah.
one of the things is how many of these imams and so-called mulvis have had CRB checks or whatever they call them now,
Well,
right? How I mean, and this is a big issue as well. This is also happening to little kids
Yeah.
in madrasas,
I
right?
mean, is that a masjid imam or is that a religious teacher CBR check? Do they have any kind of policies and procedures in place to deal with this sort of stuff here? If that person was reported to the mosque authorities that he did this, would he be suspended? Would he be disciplined? Or would he be allowed to carry on teaching that child? You and I know the reality is nothing happens. And this is something that needs to be spoken about and dealt with. But it's a massive, massive.
I'm glad you mentioned the point, but I don't want to just focus on that
Yeah,
because we're going to
obviously,
get sidetracked. Yeah,
Yeah.
but just to
I just
finalise
wanted to
that
throw it
point.
into the-
No, I'm glad
Yeah.
you did. But to finalise that point, again, it's vulnerabilities, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're taking advantage of vulnerabilities, aren't they?
Well,
Ads, what did you want to say? Sorry.
Sorry.
Just quickly include, may I say?
Okay, quickly, yeah.
Swinging it back into the actual discussion.
Yes, exactly.
And this is what I aim to do now. In relation to your bullshit, thank you very much for that very open point. Don't forget, that's not just masjids.
Yeah.
We've heard most recently about the church.
Indeed.
And I'd say not Christian.
Yes.
It's not a Christian teaching. You hear it, of course, and I'm sorry to raise it again, the Jimmy Savile argument as well. Yes, you've been forward enough to say, well, this is what's happening in the masjids. And may I say thank you to the clarification. It's the vulnerability, I think we all agree.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
It's the
Even
young
more
child
vulnerable,
being vulnerable
that's
in a
it.
vulnerable, and that could be in a masjid, that could be in a church, that could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we all agree on. It's the vulnerability
Can I
of the child.
disagree slightly on that, actually?
That's
Yeah.
fine. Come in.
I'm just gonna. The reason being that I know women who are quite strong, not vulnerable women, who have had things happen to them.
Of course.
And the problem I find is that in a lot of our communities, we have certain narratives about particularly white girls, right? And what happens with that narrative is it doesn't matter whether you're first generation, second generation, third generation. If your dad or your family, and this is the kind of conversation in the community, like look at those Gora, those Gori girls, they're outside, they're
Wearing
drinking,
miniskirts.
wearing miniskirts, blah, blah, blah. There was like this thing with Imran ibn Mansur, the Dawa man, who went to 14-year-old girls telling them what you're wearing will lead to you being raped, right? And he deleted that video.
Oh my God.
Right, like that's online. You can have a look at it. So when you've got that kind of narrative, it's not just about vulnerability. It's a very targeted thinking, and the problem is most people who have that thinking will not go and do something nasty because you keep it in your head and you don't do anything with it, right? But it's when you've got nasty people who are have access to those kind of people who do take advantage, they rely on those narratives. And sure, a lot of these girls will be vulnerable, but not all of them will be, because you see stuff like, I know stories of people who've been married into Pakistani families. They're white, they convert to Islam or whatever it is, and they get taken complete advantage of, and then they have to basically become some sort of slave of this man.
So they don't just wear the salwar kameez,
You
but
know,
they're
yeah,
just
it's
taking
way-
a completely
it's
foreign
absolutely-
culture.
Ibrahim, just,
Yeah.
we've got to be careful. We've got to be careful. Even in our discussion, we're using the context white girl, white.
Yes.
That's not right. It's not a white target. I
It's a
don't think. I
person.
think it's a. I think
Gori
it's from
is
the
a-
elders.
what does Gori mean?
No, I'll explain my point. What you have to understand is we're talking about, let's say, a generation before. Let's start with that. Was there a difference? Of course, there was a massive difference. They've come to the country. They haven't been exposed to the Western world. It is acceptable, of course, in normal culture for a young lady or even a man to wear whatever he wishes. But when you come from a culture which is very reserved, you are going to make a reference. You are going to notice it because you're not educated enough, quicker enough for the Western society.
You're not globalised
Of
enough.
course. And we have to be realistic. So it's not a targeting of white, it's a targeting of the Western culture.
But the issue
You have
is,
to be careful
based
in
on
using
that,
those.
when you then kind of build prejudices
Yes.
and discrimination, that, you said we used to go for the white girls because we didn't want to go for anyone from our community, right? Because at least no one will find out from our community, this kind of mentality. Another thing that we've heard also in the media is that the authorities knew about this. The police, for example, you've got Rotherham case, you've got the recent Telford case, naming some others, the Newcastle, there's quite a lot, right? And there's a consistent kind of narrative in the media that the so-called authorities and police didn't say anything, and they knew about it because they didn't want to be labelled as racist. Now, I find that quite incredible and hard to believe.
Yeah,
I personally
think
think it's more to do with because they were working class. It's a class issue. They were working class. They were poor girls. A lot of them from care homes, and no one really cared about them. They didn't really believe that what they were
The
talking
authorities
about.
victim blame. They said that, why are you out? There was specific cases where the authorities blamed the girls
Yeah, they were
for
saying
what
they
they
were
were wearing,
prostituting
which is
and they were
disgusting.
taking
Right,
women.
okay.
These 13-year-old girls, they're doing exactly what that man is
So
doing.
this idea of we didn't want to be labelled as racist, I just think that's a cop out, and I think it's very disingenuous. Lee, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a big problem in the Asian community with rape, but I think there's a big problem with the sexualisation of kids and white people, Asian people, just molesting kids in general. I think, as you said and you says, there's 1.7 million. You can get statistics and they can go for or against your argument. You can mould your statistics to say to make it look as whatever you want. But I think the bigger problem is, as you just said, is the brushing it under the carpet by the police. And why has that happened? And why has it been allowed to happen?
It's almost like they were waiting for it and sort of saving little pockets of this saying.
Building it
well,
up.
yeah.
And
Yes.
you have, you hear 352 people in Shropshire, 1,000 in Rotherham, 200 here, and when you hear that and then it's all Pakistani Muslim, to the media and the far right, as you said earlier, they're going to latch onto that. The far right is an answer to a problem that is going on. But I think it's a bigger problem. There's sexualisation, as you said earlier. It's the sexualisation of the kids, of our kids, that is the problem.
Like a culture of
And
sexualisation.
and white girls, I've heard it. I've known ads for 20 years. I've been in the Pakistani community, white community, black community for years. White girls are seen as easy targets.
Okay.
They're seen, because they're more likely probably to take drugs or drink, whereas the Asian community, they'll probably keep it more under wraps. If they're
Right,
doing it, they'll hide it away.
More liberal
So
parenting,
we
I
don't
guess,
see
possibly.
as much as that. But I think we need to move away from just saying, it's an Asian problem. There's a problem with the sexualisation of our kids and molesting our kids, full stop. And that's what we've got to look at instead of, it goes, but not to come off topic, but, when they say Muslim terrorists, there's a problem with terrorism, full stop. And we're giving it labels too much and we're trying to demonise certain communities.
I'm glad you mentioned that because these are two issues that the media have exclusively attributed to the Muslim community.
Yeah.
Terrorism and the latest thing is just sexual grooming gangs, right? If it's anything to do with those two kind of vices, social vices, etc., it's the Muslim face that you'll see. And you'll see a lot of Muslim faces, and we're speaking of statistics. Here's a quote from Mark Twain in 1906, American author, historian. There are three kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. So, we've got to be careful with statistics, of course, but what I do want to quickly show everyone, if we can, and if the camera can focus on this, right? We can see a grooming gang here, beyond evil people, a paedophile gang who rape babies and toddlers, etc., etc. These are disgusting images and stories. This is a married couple here, right? Husband and wife. They got jailed, imprisoned for 6-7 years, I believe. They've been let out early. Again, targeting toddlers and babies. We see this again. But the danger of this, now I'm showing everyone this. The danger is, and I know a lot of Muslims do this if they're honest with themselves, right? When we hear about whether it's paedophilia, child grooming, terrorism, they quickly get onto Google to type in white terrorists, white paedophiles.
Don't
So
look at
then,
blaming others,
so
fix the
precisely,
problem.
so we can show
Yeah.
pictures, have a counter argument, and we can counter the narrative saying, look, but the white people are doing this too, right? Does that help?
doesn't make it right.
Does that help?
Doesn't make it right, and it doesn't fix the problem. And I always say to people, look, you can blame who you want. You can say it's such and such's fault and such as a, but who cares whose fault is? Fix the problem. Because if you fix the problem, then you won't have to blame anybody. But the problem we have today is we're happy to say, no, it's not our problem, it's your problem, or it must be your problem.
I think that is one way of looking at it, but if you look at it from another point of view as well, for somebody like myself, I work in the field as a practitioner. I talk to people all the time, and I work around this whole sort of gangs and criminalization
Radicalization as well.
and de-radicalization, all that sort of stuff. The thing is, and having been on the opposite side, on the other side of things as well, and then coming onto this side, I've seen both sides of it. We as a community, Muslims, some may agree, some may not agree, but we are under attack all the time, constantly. We're being accused of this and that, of terrorism, of this, and we're this, and we're... Just look at it from a normal person's perspective. It's sometimes overwhelming. It's like, I've had enough of this. Can you just leave us alone? People just are fed up. The Asian Muslim community are fed up of all these accusations that are made against us, generalization. We're just fed up of it. So sometimes what happens in our anger and frustration, yes, we say what you said, and we say, why are you blaming us? Most of the pedophiles are white people. People say that out of their anger and frustration, but you have to appreciate and understand that, why they're saying that. Not everybody is intellectual, not everybody is educated, not everybody is, sort of a man of the world. Some people are just struggling to pay their bills and live normal lives, and they feel like they're under attack, so they vent it out like that. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. What I'm saying is that we have to accept that is a situation.
I do relate to that quite a lot, because I think when you feel constantly under threat, right, identity becomes quite important, and you get into identity politics. One thing I've found, I think, quite a lot also is I also blame people from different aspects of the Muslim community who also use identity politics. So they promote this thing that we're victims always. Everything is about being attacked.
Victimization.
There's this whole industry in the Muslim communities, in different Muslim communities, of everyone's attacking us, everyone hates us, look at the Daily Mail, this and that. They say all that kind of stuff, and that makes these kind of your average person go crazy thinking we're always in track. Actually, a lot of us live in very, very Asian communities. Yeah. Like, you can live your whole life in East London and not meet any white people, right? You can live your whole life in Luton and not face anti-Muslim hatred. So actually, in Britain today, it's not all that bad for us. Yes, we have a lot of problems, but when you go to university, we're some of the most educated communities, demographics in the UK, right? We have women going to university. It's not just purely guys go to university. There's a lot of things going for us.
Yes.
So when you've got organizations out there trying to paint this picture, also within our own communities, going, you should be angry because look at these people, they're saying all this and this. It creates this kind of, and I see this also within working class white communities, because when you see where EDL and UKIP and these things grow, they grow because they're telling them, look, they're all coming after you, they're all doing this.
So it's the anger and emotion.
It's anger and emotion, and it dehumanizes the conversation.
But then,
it's kind of what you, I think, have been kind of going for.
But what
right?
Shahid said, I mean, look, there needs to be like a balance between what you said. Yes, we can't exaggerate these kind of feelings or play the victim card, right? But at the same time, there's some truth and credence to it.
There's
because
genuine concern,
when you do put on the TV, you're just going to hear about Muslims. Let's be real, right? Another Muslim committing another crime. So I don't know. I mean, I remember studying
Depends on the
Othello.
channel that you're
But
gonna-
the thing is, it depends on the channel, yeah. But I remember,
BBC is not bad.
I remember studying Othello for A level, right? I didn't do too well, but anyway, I remember how Othello was portrayed, right? The Moor, the Moor, and how he was the Moor with a beast with two backs, and he was this kind of lustful Moor, an Arab, etc.,
Yeah,
etc. This is Shakespeare,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
going
yeah.
back to the 17th
It
century,
goes
right?
very deep.
We know about. Look, this is shown in the Sturmer, which is the Attacker. I believe this is the Nazi newspaper about the Jew, right? The Jews at the time portrayed as again lustful and sexually depraved. We have this as well, right? The lustful Turk. Okay, this is Victorian times. There was a lot of pornographic and sexual kind of novels, and this is actually one of them, but the author is unknown. Okay, the lustful Turk. But this is one of the issues. No, but what I'm trying to get at is this idea of Orientalism, right? Which I brought the book with me, Edward Said. How the Occident or the West has traditionally seen the East, and the idea of the beast, right? Even we had this snowstorm, the beast from the East. You understand me? It's about language and how we use language, and I think it indicates to a lot of how people perceive the other and this us and them kind of narrative. What do you think, Mohammed?
The clip from Dave Chappelle, he went to visit Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou, as we all know, is a famous colourful background and protester, and he was sat there and he was discussing how he felt about being black in America and so forth. And he used a reference, anger. He says, I'm angry. So Maya Angelou replied and she says, look, anger is like, or bitterness is like cancer. It eats upon its host. It doesn't do anything to the item of displeasure.
Yeah.
But what she said from then onwards was this. She said, be angry, but express it. Express it in art, in protest, in whatever. And while being a Muslim, if you are upset and angry and bitter, instead of sitting there and as you said, start pointing out, Daily Mail's doing this or this, well, get up and protest in a respectable fashion. It's our duty to educate people. I work in a predominantly English, white background city or town. It is so heartwarming and encouraging when the question is asked, what's your take on terrorism or grooming? Because then I have an opportunity for 10 or 15 minutes to sit down and say, fancy a coffee, let me explain what I know.
Remind us of your professional background.
I'm a criminal defence lawyer, I'm a solicitor advocate, I'm working the law in the higher court, I've been doing it for some years now. And I've worked, as I said, at least in the last 4 years in an English area where they're nervous to ask me the question, can you tell us what your thoughts are on the grooming gangs? Well, why is it Muslims and Pakistanis? And I sit there and explain and say, that's not the case. And this is why not the case. And you know what? I'm confident to sit here in front of this panel and say, they take the argument on board. Whatever their views, they're taking on board. But that's what we need to be doing. So express your frustration about the world, as you say, turning against you. But deal with it by protest, by explaining. That's our duty.
Well, it's the same thing with racism. You know, when it comes to racism, you know, I didn't really want to ask, but you know, are you a Pakistani? But that, you know, but English people are like that, you know. So you know, and we all do that. We all feel a little bit. I don't want to upset the person or whatever. But I agree with you. I mean,
Yes.
I'm very fortunate in the work that I do. I travel up and down the country.
Yeah.
I travel around the world, you know, and I give talks and I do workshops
Yeah.
and I go to lots of different countries, and I think that's really given me such a perspective that, you know what, yes, there are people like Tommy Robinson and the far right and all these evil characters out there and hate preachers, but you know what, there's a lot of good people out there as well, from the non-Asian white community who are just as concerned about these issues as everybody else. I always bring my guests, whenever I have guests from overseas, you know, who are, non-Muslim and non-Asian, I always bring them to these areas because they've heard about these areas. You know, I sit them outside in the coffee shop, and I say, right, sit here and just observe. Yeah. Let's see if you get mugged. Yeah. And they're like pleasantly surprised. They walk up and down. They go, we don't understand what all the fuss is about. I was like, exactly.
You know, this idea of British Pakistanis obviously representing this evil class of people targeting girls. How many British Pakistanis and British Muslims are your local GPs, doctors, nurses in your local hospitals?
This is it, you see.
Taxi drivers, all sorts, like a large spectrum, right?
If you look at the gangs as per se, and if you look at what sort of environment they have to prey on these people, it's always in the darkness of night. Yeah, so they're not going to prey on these people in there because somebody who's a professional solicitor might be standing in the same shop about to place an order, and he sees a young girl and she's being approached by a guy, I'm sure of it. Everyone here and many of the people will intervene to say, brother, I think you're being out of line here. What are you trying to do? Because somebody's daughter.
Or just call the police.
Yeah, or say, you know, what you might. Because I for myself, if I see something that ain't right, I'm going to physically put a stop to it. Say, brother, what are you playing at?
But, you know, I don't believe it's just the darkness per
No,
se.
but I'm saying is that it's the environment.
See,
and a lot of these have got drug relations, alcohol.
Yes.
So there's a certain, there's more to it than just the fact that it's Pakistani.
But you know what? Lee mentioned the sexualization culture as well.
Yes.
Now, my sister, she used to go to Hodge Hill Girls' School. And it used to be a girls' school back in the days. I'm showing her age now. Back in the 80s or something like that. And she used to tell me about guys in cars,
Outside
taxi
the
drivers,
school, yeah.
used to go outside the school and wait for the girls.
Yeah.
And I believe this happens all over the world,
Yeah.
right? It's not strictly an Asian or Muslim thing.
No.
Now, the girl that goes out with that guy, maybe she's a badge of honour. Oh, I'm going out with an older guy. Not even the oldest guy from year 11 or 6th form.
Yeah.
Forget him.
Yeah,
I'm going out with an
30 years
older
old.
guy, 30-year-old. And he sees her as a trophy.
Yeah.
So there's this cultural problem as well, you see, that we need to kind of address. Of course, same thing. She's an easy target for him.
Yeah. Because
she's
got some
vulnerable
sort
and
of
young.
insecurity that he's feeding, and then he gets that. That's what
Precisely.
It is.
I want to. We need to bring this back to the actual topic, guys.
Can I-
Okay.
I'll bring it back.
Please
There's
do, yeah, go
something
on.
that you said about kind of what's happening back home, so to say. I mean, I was in India for a business trip, and I was there with a colleague of mine who's a white woman, you know, blue eyes and things like that. And I remember trying to explain to her to be careful about what happens in India with men, packs of men, right?
Mm.
So we were walking around, and there was this literally a large group of just men following us.
Oh my
Right,
God.
not doing anything, not, you know, just following us. And she was, you know, she's like, she doesn't know what's happening, so she's like looking at the, you know, the bargaining with things and trying to buy things. And I was like, do not leave my sight because this is dangerous. Does that make sense? I
They were
was
just
like,
following you.
They were just following it. And if I knew, if I disappeared or if anything happened, it'd be like really quick. And we know about this because there's lots of like rapes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you can understand that that kind of mentality doesn't just disappear. You know, that mentality isn't, you know,
But when you-
then that it is a problem.
yes.
So when you become a
That's what I'm
migrant
saying,
community,
yeah,
that
you-
same mentality.
and it does, I'm sorry to say, it does transfer to children. Like, why can we openly talk about the problems with certain communities that end up supporting EDL, right, where there's certain narratives built in, right, that get built in, that get promoted and pushed to vulnerable people? How can that not happen to us? Of course it does, right? And of course that affects
You
how
learn that
people-
culture.
Yeah, of course that affects how these men who end up be working in the nighttime economy, they work in, you know, in these chip shops, they work in taxi drivers, they get exposed to what often, but not always, is vulnerable young women who often can be white. That mentality has stayed there and festered.
Can I just ask why would that be acceptable then in that community for them to all follow her? And if she did leave the side, why would she be in danger?
If anyone says
why would
anything
that
that's
be
dangerous to them,
acceptable?
first of all, so if anyone's intervened and said, you know, it's seen as a dangerous thing because there's this hush-hush type attitude, because these men have in the past, there's been issues of mobs of men murdering people. I think also this is just this acceptance. I mean, look at Bollywood. A lot of Bollywood stuff is so nasty in how it sexualizes women, because you've got men who are the heroes going up to women and stalking them and stuff. In this country, we'd call that stalking. In Bollywood, it's like, oh, the hero,
Absolutely, yeah.
right?
I think
So-
it's things like that enforces.
It
people's
does. It
view
really does.
that
Yeah. And
in
this
the
is why,
Pakistani
you know,
community,
I mean,
there is a big
and
problem.
it's obviously not our fault. Like, you know, you try to bring some women to this panel, but that's really a question I'd like to ask women. Like, hey, what is it that you see in your experience?
I mean, Lee, can I try to assist as well? That's a very good point about movies and videos and Bollywood and so forth. Lee, to deal with the Pakistani and the white lady, I'll be very direct about it. There are, and there has been, may I say, probably in the past, not anymore, a stage where Muslim women weren't going out as often. They were restricted in clubs, pubs and so forth. But the men, don't forget, in that type of culture, and I won't shy away from saying it, were okay to do what they want. I'm not saying that for everybody, I'm just giving my point of view here. And because they were, the only people you will meet is other westernized or social people, and they will interact. So it's acceptable. It was acceptable to date a white lady, and I don't like using the term white lady, but I'm just making it easier for the conversation, or a Western lady. And that was okay. But it wasn't okay for someone to date the young Pakistani girl at home cooking or cleaning or whatever she's doing, because she's going to have an arranged marriage soon. That's now changed, I think. I think that's changed. You will go to Broad Street on a Saturday night and you will see a vast amount of Muslim Pakistani background ladies. You will.
Yeah.
So it hasn't become, I would say, any morely, may I say, I apologise.
Oh, I know the answer to it. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
just
become
another
anyone
part
now.
to bring in another side of the argument.
Right.
As I said, I've been
Yeah.
with Ads's family for 20 years. I
Right.
know the real Islam. I know.
You didn't see ads
I
following
know-
all these white girls around, right?
I've seen-
And he called all his cousins over. This said there's like three
I know
of
the
them.
answers. I know the answers, but I just
Yeah.
want to bring a different side to the topic.
Yeah.
You know, that other people who are going to be
Yeah.
watching are going to be thinking.
Of course.
But the problem, like, to bring it back again, there's a tipping point that we'll come into where people are angry.
Right.
White people, Asian people, black, everybody's angry, and it's going to come to a point where we're gonna clash.
Right.
You've got the Tommy Robinsons who've got the big following. You've got the FLA lads, you know, who are all coming together now. You know, and then there's going to be an answer to that from the Asian community, from the black community. We've seen what happened in Lozals with the riots when they thought a black girl got raped by
In the
a Pakistani.
boutique, right?
And
Yeah,
we've seen what
supposedly.
happened.
What
We're
happened?
at a tipping point where if we don't
Right.
sort this out
Yeah.
and we don't come together, we don't have the Tommy Robinsons,
Mm-hmm.
the EDL, the far right terrorists who believe in that.
Yeah.
We don't all come together and sort something out.
Well,
I don't believe we do have an answer to
But
it.
what you just said there, doesn't that also feed into this kind of the far right, white supremacist kind of propaganda and the jihadi kind of Muslim propaganda that there's going to be an oncoming imminent civil war soon
They're
and
both the same.
you got to take sides, right?
That's
Yeah,
what I said.
they do feed off each other. But can I, while we're all sort of, throwing things into the mix, I'm going to be a little bit more controversial and just throw something else in there. When you asked the question about why is it acceptable for these groups of men to be following that in a country and why isn't it frowned upon or whatever, and when we see that sort of actions happening here as well. But let's go a little bit further. Why would men have the need, when they see someone like that, have the need to basically, that carnal need to basically want to do something to that woman? Why would they have that? This now goes into something else. This now goes into what we call basically sexual repression within our community and with those men.
Very interesting
Even
point,
though
yes.
those men, predominantly and majority of them that commit these kind of sexual acts are married men. So as a married man, why do you still need to have your desires fulfilled in a different way? So what that means is that you're not getting your desires fulfilled, which takes us into another issue where, talking about these things are such a taboo. Even talking about sexual relations within a marriage is something that the local imam is not even equipped or has the courage to talk about. It will never be talked about in the Friday khutbah. And if someone does talk about it, he gets ridiculed that why are you talking about these things for, have some shame, astaghfirullah, and so on and so forth. And from an Islamic perspective, which is what really frustrates me, is that because we're talking about Asian Muslim men, Islam is such a liberating religion that not only talks about sexuality, and it's liberating. The things, these are not issues. Scholars have spoken about it, but unfortunately now, especially in the South Indian, subcontinent, or whatever you want to call it, these issues are repressed and they're bottled in. So like you said, what happens is that when something comes in front of them, they explode.
Yeah.
Why is it that you don't see
Deprivation.
Here, that's not to say that you don't see groups of white guys, running around after a girl in a shopping centre or wherever. It does happen, of course it does,
Yeah.
But there's different
Just
reasons and
global
motivations
Muslim-
behind it.
With this Me Too movement that happened recently, and
Yep.
then what came out of that from our communities and actually Muslim communities around the world was Mosque Me Too, talking about what happens on Umrah, on Hajj.
Oh, the women in God of
the women,
Hajj and Umrah, yeah.
And actually, okay, we're all men here, so
That have
of
been
this-
groped whilst doing the
part,
tawaf.
part of this is when women in our community speak out about what's happening to them. I see time and time again, and it's not just men who do it, women also shut other women down. We need to come out openly, publicly, with our mouths in support of their ability to speak out about what's been happening to them. But when you shut these women down, right, you shut down any kind of conversation in our own communities about what's happening. When the Mosque Me Too stuff happens, where people are like, oh, but that's not halal, we shouldn't be doing that, why are you even talking about it? Just put it,
No,
But
but
you
if
can't-
there's
you
a problem,
can't-
you
you
address
ca-
it.
you
That's
can't-
what
I mean,
you can't just say,
but I've
well,
seen
this is a problem, I don't
the
know.
women get shut down.
Listen, what I want to bring this discussion back to, right, because I know there's a lot to say and we've not got much time left, and it's based on what you mentioned. As Pakistanis, for example, I'd say in Pakistan, they say 70 to 80% marriages are arranged. Okay. Now I know there's a big culture here in the UK as well, where the parents say you're going to get married to that girl, your cousin, your first cousin, yeah, your uncle's daughter or your auntie's daughter, whether you like it or not. And I've come across people from amongst the Pakistani community myself that have girlfriends on the side. Okay. So, and when you ask them, well, why did you get married to that lady? They say, well, I had no choice. Mum and dad said you're going to do it. It's like a religious obligation. Now we can argue all day long, oh, it's not in Islam, but it's culture. Look, the whole culture religion thing, that's a debate in itself. But the point is, it's happening. And I think the way, and this is going to sound very controversial, I think the Pakistani male is tired of going home, looking at his wife, who he didn't really want to marry, wearing a salwar kameez, who reminds him more of his auntie than the sexy wife that he wants to see in a skirt.
Yeah,
Okay, let's be honest about that.
Well, I disagree.
So when he leaves, I'm not saying all of them.
Maybe in the
but
80s.
what I've
maybe
seen,
in the 90s.
Oh.
Our women, and I use the word our.
Okay, go on.
So for the purpose of the discussion,
Yes.
I apologise.
No
I
problem.
don't like labelling.
No, that's
let's
fine.
use the word our.
Okay.
As in Pakistan, very attractive, mashallah, lovely, up to beat with fashion. I disagree. The days of looking like your auntie are long gone.
Yes.
Some of the aunties are looking deadly
Yeah.
nowadays.
May I deal with that? May I deal with the question
One second.
Lee, because it'll bring into
No, please,
topic.
please.
It really will bring into topic. Wonderful point. How do we resolve it? First of all, we need educated people to talk to societies, masjids, mosques, whatever. We need education. We need young people to know what is grooming. What's the signs of grooming? If some elder male or vice versa, be it a young boy, whatever. If you see these signs,
Yes.
please alert to someone. That's, we've got to emphasise that. Secondly, we need punishment. We need serious punishment
Yes.
for such criminals. But may I also make it very clear in this discussion, the police are working towards the new era. We have Instagram, Snapchat, social media, so forth. The police have abilities now when they arrest someone on suspicion, download their items on their phone, their information, and they can find intelligence.
Yeah.
It's not the 80s anymore. It's 2018. They have these devices to
They can
locate
extract
and who it
information.
is.
You didn't even know that was there.
So in order to move forward, I think we've got to stop labelling. Labelling is not helping us in relation to far right, left, or far. Let's start from the bottom.
Okay.
Let's start from the bottom. Let's
So this needs to be grassroots, yeah?
Let's get grassroots. Let's deal with the education. Let's protect them. They need protection.
Well, what you're mentioning is some of the final points, which
Yeah.
how do we move forward as a community? How do we tackle the issue? Okay, first thing is discussion, which is why we're here. If we're not willing to discuss things with people that may not agree with you, we're not going to move forward. Okay, Waleed, you want to mention something?
I think we also have to mention what, in my eyes, has been somewhat of an elephant in the room, which is how do we view women? As in, for example, Muslim, Pakistani, South Asian people. How do we view women? We put something on their head, some sort of cloak or scarf. You go sit in the house, do the dishes, clean the thing. Whereas the Western woman is more liberated, has more freedom. She can wear what she wants. How would certain Pakistani men feel about their daughters wearing miniskirts and going out? I mean, yes, free society, but would that really happen? Probably not. Or if it would, a lot of resistance and a lot of blowback would happen within that household. So yes, okay, vulnerability, but also, Western women are viewed differently. And like I think the point you made earlier about this guy who's got married, it probably was an arranged marriage, most likely. I mean, these guys, if they're like 30, 40 years old, then they're probably from that generation. They're not now. They're not 16 or 17.
Of course.
They're probably from that generation where they didn't choose their partner. There's probably not a lot of emotional connection. It's not, of course, not with everyone, but these kind of people, it's more.
They're there, and there's a lot of them.
And it's more acute within them. They didn't choose their partner. They're in this 9 to 5. They don't have much flexibility. They have kids after the first year. And now they get this opportunity to maybe explore this sexual side, this naughty side, and this happens to be a vulnerable or not vulnerable girl who's more accessible, and they're with their mates. And there's also this in-group, out-group mentality, whereas, for example, they're not doing it with Pakistani girls on the street because if we're doing it in a group, or you might be your cousin, you might know them. If it's white, and I'm just saying white because that's not Pakistani.
Right.
And it's also happened to Sikh girls, by the way.
Yes.
It's also happened, so let's not forget, where some men have pretended to be Sikh, but if it's happening to white girls or non-Pakistani girls, it's outside the community. So if it happens, it's not necessarily that I'm connected to that person or I'm connected to them. So there's that bit of distance as well.
Yeah.
So there's also like these young white girls are from broken houses. So there's so many different factors that play into this.
Do you
But
think
we have to own the narrative. Like
no,
what you
we
said,
need to
we
own the
we have to
narrative,
own
but
the
do you
narrative.
think it's quite convenient though when this same thing happens to people of a quite high political status like
Mr. Savile.
Mr. Savile,
Yeah,
there you
yeah.
go, Mr. Savile. It's posthumous. It's when he's dead, right? It's a historical sexual
Yeah.
abuse claim. So he's dead and gone now.
Yeah.
Oh, so now he's in his grave. He's not accountable
I-
to anyone.
I think we're still
Right?
there, yeah.
We've got the issue of Edward Heath, who's the ex-prime minister of this country. Just he's the predecessor of Margaret Thatcher. He's dead. He died in 2005. There's at least 10 to
Because
12
if
sexual
yeah.
abuse. Well, there's at least 10 to 12 sexual abuse cases against him. But who's going to hold him accountable now? Right?
I think you make very valid points. These are all things that were institutionally ignored throughout the ages. Jimmy Savile, and there's many other. I'm sure there's many other
So
politicians.
there's a lot of
I don't
hypocrisy.
think they were
I'm sure
ignored.
they-
I think they knew about it.
They knew about it,
but
but
they
they
just
didn't-
couldn't do anything about it
I
because the
agree.
blowback from
Yeah.
it would demolish
But-
countries.
Mm.
Because Jimmy
I
Savile
agree.
was the go-to guy. You wanted to do
Yeah, of
something
course.
sick and out of your mind. You'd go to him and he'd make it happen.
Sir, he's a sir, right?
You know what I
He's
mean?
united.
So-
It is more of, if you like, civilizational projection. So you know what's happening in your community, but let's just blame the foreigners
I think
or the other
there's-
community
yeah,
because
I
it
think-
kind of escapes it from focusing on us.
Well, that's the
Can I-
weakness.
can I make a
that's the
clarification?
weakness, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
the weak, that's why we
Deflection.
There you go,
we fail.
deflection.
We fail because, and I say we as in people.
Hmm.
This is what we've got to stop. Maybe this is the discussion.
The blame game.
Maybe this is the starting point where we sit back and say, we've now seen a few clips, but none of us are going to label that white. We're better than that.
Yes.
Those are criminals.
Yeah.
They
Full
are
stop.
criminals of
Evil
their
is
mind.
evil. There's no-
It's not their colour that defines them.
Or their
Let's
religion.
just stop that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jimmy Savile. You mentioned the MPs or the senior people. Let us not label.
Yeah.
But
Let's
you know,
not
but
throw
we
it
don't.
around.
I mean, like I said, this is the field. I work in this field, and I meet lots of people. And whenever you hear about, for the purpose of the conversation, a white paedophile. You know, as a community, we never sit around a coffee
Nobody says
table and
Christian
say
paedophile.
that, oh, he's a Christian or whatever. This is something that doesn't come into our mind. We don't actually do that.
We say white though.
Yeah, we do say white because
say
obviously
Gora.
that's the color of his skin.
We say Gora. So
Yeah,
we do-
it-
But he's not
because-
ostracized, so he's
Yeah,
not criminalized.
yeah,
as
but
white.
we're saying that, because that's a
Where am I-
factual
where
thing.
am I
But
going?
what I'm saying-
That's-
we're
but
not-
see,
You
but-
do have a
what I'm
point.
saying is that
do
we
make
don't
the
take
reference.
it.
We do make the reference.
We have
Why?
not reference.
Nobody
We
says
do.
why Jimmy Savile.
But
Just
but
in
but
case
but,
of-
but, but the
That's
argument
what
is
we
the
put to
argument
stop.
is
That's what we put to
the
stop.
majority of people in this country are white,
So
right?
Therefore,
It's more likely, you know,
Yes.
ratio-wise and probability
I
for it
think-
to happen,
I
right?
think when we went to the beginning, to bring it back full cycle almost, the over representation of Pakistani men in grooming gangs. That's the issue. Not everyone does sexual crime, everyone does every sort of crime. That's
Yes.
not the issue here. But it's the over representation,
Yes.
and the question is why.
Yes.
So we mentioned several things. For example, they're not happy with their own marriages. There's also
Forced marriage.
forced marriages,
Yeah.
social problems combined with what's happening with these victims here, and also there's this issue. This is a problem of victim blaming. Oh well, she was wearing this, and she asked for it, and she asked me
Yes.
for some booze, so I just helped her out. And
Racial prejudice
Racial
and
prejudice.
racial prejudice
And
towards
racial
white
prejudice,
girls.
oh,
I mean,
Gore and all that.
I want to just quickly early on. You mentioned something about kind of you said it was a controversial opinion about these men are married to people that they
It looks
don't
like they're
find-
aunties or something.
I mean, I don't know because if you there's these movements they're called slut walks, right? And the whole
Okay.
idea they're called slut walks, and there's a deeper meaning to that, which is that women are told that they were dressed like sluts, which is why they were raped or what.
Mention that again. What's it
It's
called?
called the slut walk. So
Okay.
women will go out wearing often what they were wearing when they were abused, right?
Right.
And one of the things that you see time and time again is they say, look, I was wearing this boring cardigan, I was wearing glasses. I was not looking, you know what I mean? Because the problem is women
But
are
you're-
blamed.
We say the high eyes in your own eyes.
So what I'm guessing
You know,
is
if you see something, somebody could be naked in front of you, but you turn your eyes down.
Well,
That lady
yeah.
Godiva was sitting on a horse naked. Why do people turn away?
So the
Because
point
they had shame
and the
in their
point
eyes.
is like men who want to abuse
Yes.
women
They won't have
will
that
abuse
shame.
them no matter
What they're wearing.
she
They
looks
could be
like,
fully
what
covered
they
and
look
they'll-
like.
yeah.
etc.
But what I was trying to highlight is not the Salwal Kabeez. What I was trying to highlight is the forced marriage.
Yeah,
But
right?
No, I get
on
that.
that point, can I just make a clarification? You talked about arranged marriage. I think sometimes and this is for the viewers, if they're not Muslims or Asians, or even Asians might not understand. When we say arranged marriage, there's a bit of a difference here.
There's a
Yes.
big
Yeah?
difference, not little.
For instance, you have an arranged marriage, like for I had an arranged marriage.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, my arranged marriage, what it meant was that my mother organised. She gave me possible suitors.
Courting,
She
yes.
brought people
Yes.
that
Different
this,
kind
that,
of-
and
Compatibility
and
circle.
but When I look back now, if I was to make a decision about getting married, I would have messed it up big time. Because I never had a clue. All I wanted to do was chill out with the lads, enjoy myself. I didn't have a clue about these kind of intricacies. My mother, obviously who's raised me, knows my character, knows what I'm like. So she looked for the person who, in her mind, she thought would be compatible with me. And it doesn't always...
That's another debate, by the way. What do we mean by arranged marriage?
Can I also address
bring it back.
One very quick point. Pakistani. Pakistani. Remember, we're using this word.
Yes.
Let's be a bit intelligent about it, shall we not? What makes you a Pakistani? Is it because your parents were from Pakistan, and automatically, whilst you're living in Britain,
In fact, you're born in Britain.
even though you're born in Britain, but you're part of a Pakistani grooming gang. I'm going to say we don't know what the definition is anymore, simply because maybe if you spoke to any of these members, do they have any Pakistani cultural elements to them?
Yeah.
Can they still speak the language?
Have they
have they even been to Pakistan? What do they do? What's their lifestyle? The point I'm saying to you is, I think we shouldn't blame Pakistani per se. I think that's wrong. Pakistanis around the world aren't all paedophiles. They're not grooming gangs. So this is it's a label
But
thing.
this is why Sarah Champion, the former Labour MP of Rotherham, stood down after that
That
comment,
is
right?
to
Complete
her.
generalisation of British Pakistani
Listen,
men.
if you remember a few years ago, guys, in the Bradford riots, I remember there was an interview, and he was an old Pakistani guy, sort of came here in the 60s, like majority of them did, hard-working guy, never got a parking ticket, never got a fine, the old school type. And I remember there was a guy he was interviewing. It was like, it wasn't sort of on the BBC or something. It was an informal thing that went viral at the time. And he was saying that, look at this, because they just tore Bradford down. It was horrendous what they did, all the young Asian guys. And he was saying, these are your guys, and what do you have to say about it? And he goes, no, these are not my guys. The Asian sort of guy with his strong Pakistani accent. He goes, my guys are like me, we came here,
We built the
keep our
country, not
family, we
destroyed
built
it.
it, we work. I've never even got a parking ticket. These are your guys. They've studied here, they're born here, this system, this culture. They don't care, they don't know nothing about Pakistan, they don't know their language, they don't know their deen, they don't know nothing. These are British Asian guys that were in your system, in your school, that did all this. My guys, who came from my generation, we were here for 40, 50 years before. Have you ever seen us not even get a parking ticket? So at the same time...
So once they became British,
That's a very good point there.
they learned this culture here.
But, I mean, they have parents, right? So how did their parents raise them? That's why I don't like. It's very easy to say, "Oh, we did this." And
But you spend 8 hours
if it's your child, then how did you raise your child to act like that?
But that's another debate. Is there a communication between the parents and the kids now, right?
It's an interesting...
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say it's an interesting thing about identity politics, though, because you want to claim you're Muslim or Pakistani when it's like to your benefit, but then when it's not, you're like, oh no.
For example, if Amir Khan won gold in the
Yeah, like it's Pakistani,
but if the pedophile thing happens, or if it's like, oh, but hang on a second, what's Pakistani?
That's not Muslims, that's not Islam, right?
There you go. So we can be
very
careful
careful about.
So that's
But I mean, if I say I'm Pakistani somewhere and I'm going to get my head kicked in, I won't say it.
Sure.
Why? I'm not stupid to go into fire. Unfortunately, there's situations where you have to sort of go a bit less towards that, and that's because certain problems have been tainted to us, right? And a problem is a problem, a criminal is a criminal, a crime is a crime. Doesn't matter if 99 Pakistani people are part of that gang out of 100 and one isn't, you can't say Pakistanis is. Yes, we live in a democracy, and in all other things there's democracy, majority wins, but in this element, when it comes to criminality, if there's 99 people that are doing something from one group and there's one of them who's not doing it, you can't label that group because of that one guy is innocent.
Otherwise it's prejudice.
You go to Thailand, right?
Yeah.
Over 90% of these young guys that are getting taken up by these people, European, white, 50 to 60-year-old male guys, and they're taking young kids into Thailand. You look at the cannabis farms. You look at the cannabis farms in UK. 80-90% are done by the Vietnamese community. You look at the scrap metal atrocities that are going on. 99% of the time, it's the Romanian gangs that are doing it. Every single sort of demographic will have certain crimes that are more predominant in that, but you still can't say white guys are pedophiles, Romanian guys are thieves, Vietnamese guys are cannabis growers, Pakistani guys are grooming. You can't do that.
I agree. I agree with you about language, because what's happening is that otherwise it's bigotry, right? Because if you say it's prejudice, but so I think the language that can be used that I feel comfortable with, if let's say if Bangladeshis were doing something, right? Because there's a lot of Bangladeshis doing something, because I'm Bangladeshi. so you would say like this. Group of people who happen to be Bangladeshi or something like that. That language I'm okay with. Or even if they say there's a problem because 70% of Bangladeshi...
Wouldn't it be better just to name them?
Yeah.
But let's forget...
What are their names?
Well, no, it
I'll
depends.
tell you what.
I'll tell you why that I think that might not work, because institutions do matter. So when we talk about political grooming gangs that exist in politics, you talk about that institution, and there it is important. It's relevant to explain to a readership that actually this is coming out from politics. So you talk about the institution. For us, our institutions will tend to be the culture we're from, the diaspora community we come from, the religion that a lot of people will ascribe to. So institutions. You can't just say, oh, let's kumbaya, let's like... No.
Political correctness.
Me and you would address each other as, would you accept, we're British. That's our first.
I'm multi-hyphenated. I'm British. I'm from a Muslim background, but I'm an atheist. I'm Bangladeshi. My mom's from
But would you
Pakistan.
accept our level playing field? For the viewers, this is important.
To simplify things.
I'm British.
We're British first.
You know, it's the funniest thing for me.
No, but I think it comes down to the question that you're asked. If somebody asked me, what's your nationality? I would say British. If somebody asked me, what's your religion? I would say Islam. If somebody asked me, what's your ethnicity? I would say Pakistani.
So
because I was born in
that,
Pakistan.
if I was to say, what are you or who are you? What would you say first? This is the problem.
Well, first I'll say I'm a human being.
Yeah, human being.
Well, one of the debates...
But it depends on the
Start
question.
with that.
No, but it depends on the question. So if you said, what are you, or who are you, well, first I would say, well, I'm a Muslim. But if you asked me, what's your nationality? Like if you're a border guard, and you say, you go there, what's your nationality? I say British.
But the tabloid headline has not got enough space to mention all these different multifarious identities, British, Muslim, Pakistani, male, 36... It's just going to give one blanket sensational title. Give the name. But
we are
debate.
the buyers of this paper. We
true.
are the people. While the listeners are listening, we are the people. In Liverpool, especially, I won't make references, the local Liverpoolians, the residents, took an issue with the Sun newspaper, and nobody bought the Sun. It's still living the effects now.
Yes.
We need to empower each other. We need to be reminded we are the people.
The problem is segregating people. The more you segregate people, the weaker you make them, and the more you can influence smaller pockets.
Okay, we need to
stick together. Like you said, there's a problem. If we address the problem to say, right, paedophilia, full stop, we don't want it. Grooming gangs, we don't want it, and everybody works together. And if you have a panel, not just a Muslim men, but you have white people in there, you have women in there, say, look, we need your input to fix this problem because we don't have the tools. Give us the tools. Help us.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. Okay, we've gone on for a long time. Yeah, how's it looking?
And we haven't even scratched the surface.
Each person, I want to give less than 10 seconds. How do we move forward with this? Each person, starting with you, Lee. Go on, Lee.
I think it's just more discussions and coming together, not separating culture and race.
I would agree with Lee. Most of these things historically have always come from the fact that we've been divided, or generally humans get divided and cause conflict. So if we stick together and say, let's all of us solve the problem, I think we'll be able to overcome it much quicker and with more efficiency.
I think that the vacuum that gets created in conversation, because partly of identity politics, is not useful. And I think by engaging people, particularly victims, particularly women, and having them lead the conversation is one strong way we can get out of this.
Yeah, I agree with all the points that have been made. But at the same time, I think we need to be realistic in the way that we look at things. When we talk about unity, are we really going to have a unity in all of this? We need to be realistic in our approach, and we need to be holistic in our approach.
Yeah, I think just, the problems should always be seen as a problems, not attributed to the perpetrator and then sort of targeted his community as a problem community. It's just the problem on its own, and I think we should break down the walls in between our different communities and cultures and move forward, understanding things and deal with them in a more sort of communal manner.
I think we've got some really tough questions we have to ask each other. We have to admit there is a problem, and we have to take ownership of that problem instead of deflecting it onto other communities and saying, oh, well, they do this and they do that. That's fine, but we have to admit we have a problem and have some real honest conversation.
Everyone has their own views. Mine is this: we must educate from a very young age on what all this grooming is about, what vulnerability is. Next, after that, what we need to do is step forward and protest and support our agencies like the police, the local agencies, to put a stop to it. And I think we're doing great. We could do a bit more and work towards the right direction. Thank you.
Okay, I think Tony Blair would agree with that education part. Okay, well, my personal opinion, everything that you guys have said, there's a lot of truth to it, a lot of validity. We need to keep talking. This platform that I'm trying to provide is to discuss taboos, difficult, uncomfortable topics It's not bread and butter TV, it's CloseShave TV, and it's CloseShave TV for a reason. I hope you've enjoyed the show, everyone. Please like, subscribe, continue watching, and we will hopefully do a second, third, and continue to do more of these debates. And maybe you guys as viewers can pick the next subject. Thanks for watching. Take care, stay safe, and God bless.